Crash, welcome to London's Craziest Gangster with me, Mr. Fish, keeper of the Dead Man's Bible, where all the rules of society are thrown, tossed and washed away. Okay? I'm the guy standing on the pavement, riding on the train, looking at all you people thinking, I wonder what it's like to be you. To wake, to work, to eat, to sleep, to dream, to die. Because that's where it ends. Right, today I'm in my flat now, sitting down all alone, and the bell rings, and in comes a guy called Alex. And it's quite funny because Alex is from the middle class fraternity, and after the podcast I gave about the new middle class fraternity, it's quite interesting that Alex should be here. And Alex was just telling me how his friends from the trust fund community, the high guy community, Alex was just telling me that they always, grunge up and go to East London, and they feel that East London is the epicenter of creativity, philosophy, and wisdom. Okay, but I had to laugh, because people. When Alex said to me that when people say to him, "Oh, where do you come from?" and Alex says, "Oh, West London," he says that his trust fund friends, the high guys, look at him and say, well, "What are you doing in West London?" No, nothing's happening in West London. But West London is the epicenter of creativity. It's the epicenter of art. It's the epicenter of unity and coming together. It is the unspoken. It's the unspoken truths that happen in the wider community that are not heard of. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say by that is, even though Laserdrome was in Peckham, the owners are from West London. You understand? So we were the ones who brought, all the DJs together. We were the ones who brought it from out of the fields into the nightclubs. So West London was the first to create that. We were the ones that, even when it switched from happy hardcore to jungle, we were the first to create that. But it's never spoken about. We never get the credit for what we've achieved. West London were also the very first area, I would say, to unify people together more than any other area in London. And so when people go, oh, like Alex just said, his trust fund friends, the high guys, say, oh, why are you living in West? Well, let me explain to you guys why Alex is living in West. Alex is living in West because West London was where it all began, in the sense of racial divide. And so you have to remember now, let's go to Notting Hill, Ladbroke Grove, when we had the no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. Okay? You have to remember that the blacks and the Irish and the dogs, even the dogs, they took on that fight first. They had the riots in Notting Hill. We had the sticks and stones throwing at the windows, throwing at the police. We had the battles, right? That in the end created unity. It didn't create equality, but it created unity. It was the start. And then from Ladbroke Grove, they pushed out into Shepherd Bush. Okay? And Shepherd Bush was, I would dare say, one of the very first areas to embrace the multicultures that came into the country. And stemming from those days right up until now, if you look at Shepherd Bush now, you wouldn't even recognise it as a community which was predominantly white in the old days. Okay? And we never ever, in the sense of crime and guns, in the sense of fashion, DJs. We never, as an area, West London has never ever really been credited, right, with the credit it deserves for what we've been through. You know, even when it comes to crime, and we talk about, you know, we always think when you talk about villains and gangsters, you always think about South London or East. Yet the predominantly and the highest crime rates were always in the West. That was the whole joke. The West London has always spearheaded everything, all the genres, all the subjects, than any other community. And when you look at all the other communities, why would you want to go to another community? Well, East London are still struggling right now, even though it's changed and it's moved on. It's the new middle class genre now. You know, they still have a very hard struggle with coming together as one and moving forward with unity. As I said to you, Shepherd Bush were the first. When you looked to the outer circle of Shepherd Bush, so you go into Fulham, Fulham was always a little bit behind Shepherd Bush, so they still had, I don't know, not their fault, but they still had the racist element there. You know, the Chelsea headhunters were perceived as racist. They had the big skinhead following, but what you have to remember when we talk about these issues, I was involved in all these issues, so I mixed with the skinheads, I mixed with the Chelsea headhunters, not in going to Chelsea, but I knew of them, because on my take it was always, well, everyone has a right to think and feel the way he does, and if you have someone who you perceive to be racist or something, then I feel the best way to deal with that racism and to change his mind is through education. Do you know what I mean? And so it's better to meet them and talk to them and understand them, and so that you can then hopefully get them to understand you, so then we can change their minds to the way they feel. But West London has always been at the forefront of bringing people together. Acton was the same as Fulham. Acton still had the racial element, only over time, and you know, did it change. Just like Fulham and Acton both changed gradually over time, due to more and more ethnic communities being moved into their communities, and they got to mix better, and they got to communicate and educate at their schools, and so we came up there. So they came up to better, you know, they came up together now, more so now than they did in the old days. So it's always been very hard for other areas. Let's go to Chiswick now. Chiswick has always been predominantly, they say, middle class, and so Chiswick was another one. It's never really been spoken about. It's always, I know all their children have quietly been hidden under the carpet. It's not, they've never been out on the broadsheets, out in the main arena. But Chiswick also had their, Chiswick we always perceived as a middle class area. We never ever looked at it as racist or non-racist. But because we never really, nobody ever really, it was never really taken on board. To be honest with you, unless you had to go to Chiswick, you never even thought of Chiswick. But a lot of creativity and a lot of millionaires and middle class came from Chiswick, and in a sense, I would say Chiswick helped both Fulham, Shepherd Bush, Acton, and Grove come out of poverty, because their expertise, their creativity, their wealth filtered down to us, and we had a chance without actually realizing that it was happening, but we actually had a chance to learn from them and and use their skills and knowledge and education to help us grow as people. And so when people say to me about West London has always been an active, vibrant, unified area, and that's why people can never really come at us and attack us, because we don't back down, because we're black and white, we're unified. What was the stadium you were talking to me about? Cayenne Prince Stadium. Now, Alex very duly spoke to me about the Cayenne Prince Stadium, and he spoke to me about his dad and how his dad has become the champion of doing good things, and for QPR to name their stadium Cayenne Prince after Cayenne had been stabbed is a wonderful achievement, and it's a wonderful legacy, and once again putting West London on the map, even though you may think that it's a bad thing to be put on the map for. But when you look at Cayenne Prince's dad and what he's achieved, and when you look at how Cayenne Prince's dad has elevated people's opinions of crime, stabbing, and of his own mindset. You know, I need Cayenne Prince's dad to understand that there are people out here thinking, what a man you are, what a champion you are, to have gone through that and to have aired all your emotions, your hurt, the pain and the anguish you have felt over your son dying, and to bring that out to the nation. And there are so many people, black, white, young, old, all across the whole class spectrum, who respect what you have done and the achievements what you have achieved. And you have touched so many people that I dare say you don't even know how many people you have really touched. And that, once again, has come from West London. So even out of the pain and the hurt, West London has managed to show people in the various communities up and down the country, not just London-wide, but nationwide, how to deal with the hurt and the pain of a loved one, of a very young loved one, a loved one who's had his whole life ahead of him, his whole dream, a loved one who will never ever see his dream. And so West London again has led the way in how you deal with tragedy, how you deal with hurt, especially in this situation. I mean, only yesterday again, a 16-year-old was stabbed. But as I said to you in the last podcast, the people in control, they don't care, and that's the problem. And today I watched on the news that there are fears that if we come out of lockdown too soon, violence will escalate. Well, no disrespect to those in control, but I feel violence has already escalated. A 16-year-old got stabbed in Croydon the other day. Can violence escalate more than that? I don't think it can. when you're losing one life, when one life is lost, is that not enough to say, look, we need more police on the street, we need to open up our police stations again? Is that not enough? And if you are really saying, oh, if we come out of lockdown too soon, too early, if you really do believe that the violence could escalate, then like any good architect who draws up the plans before he builds the building, maybe you should reopen some of your police stations that you shut down and put more officers in uniform rather than plain clothes driving around in X5s and Jeeps with MP5s, which is no good to nobody, no disrespect. And put more officers back on the streets, visualise them like that, and so we can prevent this so-called escalation of crime. Okay, so for me, West London has always been at the forefront of what unity and coming togetherness should be about. West London has always been about pride, respect. It's always been about achieving and not being scared to achieve what you want. West London has allowed everybody of every colour, of every ethnic background, black, white, yellow, orange, whatever you want, is allowed us to strive forward and to try and achieve our dreams. And even if we couldn't achieve our dreams, at least we was allowed to travel down roads which others from other areas would never be able to see. And so that was just a short podcast just to say West London, as Alex was asking me about West London. So I just wanted you to know that West London is a brilliant area, a class area. I was born in West London, alright, moved to Basingstoke, I came back to West, and I wouldn't live in anywhere else in the country better than West London. You know, we've had our issues, we've confronted our issues, we've dealt with our issues, and we've moved on. And I couldn't have asked for a happier area to be raised in, to live in. And the people that I've met in West London, second to none. They've opened doors for me which otherwise would have never been opened. But not just in the crime world, but you know, in the banking world, in the building world. I've been House of Parliament, you know. I've been with the Bentley Azures. I've lived with the Aston Martins. I've lived in the mansions. I've lived in the castles, and I've lived St John's Wood in the palaces. I've done it right across the spectrum. And each and every one of those people that opened those doors for me and allowed me to enjoy those events, even down to eating in the Savoy, eating and mixing with the Houses of Commons, all have come from people who have lived in West London. So next time, before you want to put West London down, understand, West London is in the game. Crash! Remember where you saw me first. Remember where you heard me last. Okay. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the show alive with me, Mr. Fish. And one more thing before I go. No matter where you live, no matter where you are, okay, enjoy the world you live in today. Enjoy your consumerism. Enjoy buying nice things. Enjoy going out when we get back out of the coronas. Enjoy each other. Enjoy coming together. Enjoy being alive today. That is it. Enjoy it. Yeah? Because after your life has gone, once it's finished, it's over. So the question is, do you want to die happy or sad? Ha 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 ha. Crash. Ah.